Understanding Sidney Poitier's cause of death. The quiet end of a towering life. Sidney Poitier was more than just a performer. At a time when America was still developing an honest self-image, he represented dignity, self-control, bravery, and advancement. It felt more like the end of a chapter in moral and cultural history than the death of a famous person, as word of his passing spread in early January 2022. Poitier passed away quietly at the age of 94, away from the commotion of film premieres and award shows. His legacy changed Hollywood and inspired future generations to expect more from society and the arts. Even though his death was not unexpected, the events leading up to it represented the inevitable end of a long life molded by grace, discipline, and hardship. In order to comprehend Sidney Poitier's cause of death, one must comprehend both the medical facts and the personal journey that preceded them. The medical facts that led to his death: cardiopulmonary failure, HAA, disorder in which the heart and lungs progressively lose their capacity to support the body, is the cause of Sidney Poitier's death. Elderly people frequently experience this kind of failure, especially those whose bodies have been weakened by age-related ailments. Poitier's death was not caused by a single, unexpected occurrence, but rather by a number of overlapping medical issues. Alzheimer's disease, a neurological condition that gradually impairs memory, cognition, and motor coordination, was another condition Poitier was dealing with in his later years. Alzheimer's weakens the body over time, increasing its susceptibility to infections, organ failure, and cardiovascular collapse, but it usually does not result in death on its own. The body's systems find it more difficult to work together as the illness progresses, which raises the risk of respiratory and cardiac problems. Prostate cancer, a diagnosis that had been treated privately, was another contributing factor. The cancer added stress to an already aging body. Even though it was not thought to be aggressive in his terminal stage, it created a precarious medical picture when combined with cardiac weakening and dementia. Poitier's physique eventually reached its limit. He passed away quietly at home without experiencing any trauma or unexpected medical emergency. It was the silent dying of a life that had given its all. A reason for death disclosed. An era came to an end with Sidney Poitier's death on January 6, 2022. The first Black man to win the Academy Award for Best Actor passed away peacefully at his Beverly Hills home at the age of 94, rather than in the spotlight of Hollywood. Although millions of people throughout the world mourned his passing, the medical community now understands that he died of cardiopulmonary failure, with prostate cancer and Alzheimer's disease identified as contributory factors. These health issues, discreetly endured in the last years of a life generally celebrated by the public, provide light on the human realities behind a person who is frequently thought to be larger than life. In essence, cardiopulmonary failure is the body's last compromise. It occurs when the heart and lungs are unable to cooperate to maintain life. This physiological deterioration was a sharp contrast to the vigor that characterized Poitier on screen, as his roles required endurance, physical presence, and emotional depth. However, it seems somewhat appropriate that his departure was quiet, a private moment spent with those closest to him rather than a dramatic farewell. His last curtain lowered with elegance and stillness, after decades of commanding attention on worldwide stages and in movie theaters. A silent companion in his later years was Alzheimer's disease, a degenerative neurological condition. Those who knew Poitier noticed minor changes in memory and cognition over time, even if his public appearances had lessened. Alzheimer's weakens the connections between the past, present, and identity in addition to robbing a person of memory. This illness presented a silent, unrelenting challenge to a man whose life had been based on story, conversation, and human expression. It serves as a reminder that everyone is susceptible to the common frailties of humanity, even the strongest and most successful people. His health profile was further complicated by prostate cancer, which was another factor in his demise. Although it is frequently curable in its early stages, it can exacerbate other health conditions and reduce resilience in older persons. It probably made Poitier's cardiovascular system and overall vitality more taxed. It combined with Alzheimer's and cardiopulmonary failure to create a trio of illnesses that eventually and unavoidably brought about his death. Knowing the reason for Sidney Poitier's passing enables us to recognize the richness of his life prior to disease taking hold, rather than focusing only on life's frailty. His death was caused by age-related natural processes that were exacerbated by illnesses that are sadly prevalent in the elderly. However, these facts do not lessen his legacy. Rather, they put it in perspective and serve as a reminder that, in the end, even cultural, cinematic, and civil rights heroes are subject to the same limits as everyone else. Poitier's last years were characterized by introspection, family, and calm dignity rather than performance. He received the close-knit support that everyone needs when faced with deteriorating health while surrounded by loved ones. In stark contrast to the intense public attention and high-stakes pressures that had characterized much of his career, this private treatment, insulated from public observation, allowed him to pass away peacefully. The human aspect of a legend, who frequently appeared impenetrable on television, is highlighted by the contrast between a life spent so openly and a death experienced in privacy. His death's medical causes also prompt reflection on the relationship between vulnerability, success, and age. Sidney Poitier broke down barriers in Hollywood, earned groundbreaking success, and became a timeless representation of resiliency and dignity. However, his last chapter serves as a reminder that nothing can stop the physical effects of aging, not even grandeur. It provides a lens through which to honor both his accomplishments and his death, humanizing him in ways that no award or recognition could. It is important to weigh Poitier's life's richness against the circumstances surrounding his demise. He died of heart and lung failure, which was exacerbated by prostate cancer and Alzheimer's. But he also leaves behind a world that has been forever altered by his presence. The narrative of his death is inextricably linked to every part he played, every threshold he crossed, and the dignity with which he aged. Understanding how he died away enables us to both recognize the universal truths of human weakness and truly celebrate what he accomplished. In the end, Sidney Poitier's passing is more than just a medical incident. It is the result of a brave, dignified, and influential life. The final factors that took his physical life were prostate cancer, Alzheimer's disease, and cardiopulmonary failure. But his spirit, the values, accomplishments, and inspiration he shared, transcends these illnesses. As we consider the reasons behind his passing, we are reminded that a person's life, not their demise, is what truly defines them. Sidney Poitier's life was characterized by unforgettable humanity, moral bravery, and innovative craftsmanship. Despite being sculpted by age and sickness, his passing highlights the incredible fortitude of a man who, despite his deterioration, continues to be a timeless representation of greatness, decency, and optimism. Even though his body eventually perished due to illness and the passage of time, the legacy he leaves behind is priceless and serves as a reminder that the influence of a life well lived endures across generations. A gradual retreat from the public eye, Sidney Poitier had steadily withdrawn from public life long before he passed away. He hardly ever gave interviews or attended events in the years preceding his death. This retreat was a reflection of his health and philosophy rather than a rejection of the outside world. Poitier has always valued privacy, particularly in vulnerable situations. His family took center stage as his Alzheimer's disease worsened. He was away from the demands of celebrity and spent time with his loved ones. Those who knew him well spoke of a man who maintained a profound sense of composure and dignity even as his memory went. His movement slowed and his voice became quieter, but his presence was still strong. The rigorous scrutiny he faced during his career contrasted with this latter phase of his life. Like in life, Poitier opted for moderation in death. From deprivation to meaning. One must comprehend Sidney Poitier's background in order to completely appreciate the significance of his passing. Poitier was raised in abject poverty after being born in 1927 to Bahamian parents. Racial discrimination, adversity, and a lack of opportunities impacted his early life. He battled homelessness and illiteracy after immigrating to the U.S. as a youth. Acting was a lifeline rather than a clear path. Poitier learned to read by memorizing dialogue while listening to the radio. He studied nonstop in order to overcome the prejudices that were placed on black males in America in the middle of the 20th century, as well as to perform. His resolve was driven by purpose rather than celebrity. He endured decades of public pressure and personal sacrifice thanks to the same discipline. The burden of being. The first, being the first, was a burden that few actors ever bear, and Sidney Poitier bore it. Whether he wanted to or not, he became a symbol. As the first black man to win the Academy Award for Best Actor, every position he took on was closely examined. Each performance was viewed as a declaration. His career decisions were influenced by this pressure. Black characters with intelligence, integrity, and restraint were frequently portrayed in Poitier's roles. Poitier was aware of the risks, despite occasional criticism that he was overly cautious or idealistic. One mistake might shut doors for him and future generations in a fundamentally discriminatory sector. There is a cost associated with that degree of responsibility. The emotional burden Poitier carried throughout his life contributed to the extreme discipline that marked him, and perhaps to the tension that aged his body, even if it was unrelated to the cause of his death. Growing old and quiet, Sidney Poitier did not describe his decline, in contrast to many public figures. He didn't use his illness as a platform for a public campaign or a farewell show. Silence became his shield as Alzheimer's progressed. This has a profoundly suitable quality. Poitier had used his art to speak loudly throughout his career. Ultimately, he let the work do the talking. There were neither public vigils nor dramatic hospital scenes following his passing. It arrived silently in a house full of relatives, memories, and the remnants of a purposeful existence. The significance of his death caused medical terminology like cancer, Alzheimer's illness, and cardiopulmonary failure do not adequately describe Sidney Poitier's demise. Time was the true cause of death. The amount of time spent battling for representation, carrying expectations takes time. Dignity was prioritized before convenience. Time spent growing older in a body that bore the weight of history. In the traditional sense, his death was not tragic. It was unavoidable. However, it felt weighty since it signified that popular culture had lost its moral compass. What's left over? After the body fails. Like all bodies, Sidney Poitier's eventually failed. His heart grew weaker. His recollection faded. He began to breathe more slowly. His effect, however, was unfailing. Poitier owes something to every actor who now enters a set without wondering if they belong. Every movie that respects and takes Black humanity seriously owes some of its origins to him. Although his bodily life ended with his death, his presence remained intact. In fact, it made things clearer. In conclusion, Sidney Poitier did not pass away in the limelight. He didn't pass away trying to be relevant. He passed away quietly. He passed away with self-control, dignity, and quiet strength, just as he had lived. His cause of death reveals the medical reason for his demise. His legacy explains the significance of his life. And Sidney Poitier endures, unaffected, unbroken, and unforgettable, long after the last breath, heartbeat, and memory disappear.